Hey, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I have a very special video for you. I'm going to teach you how you can add Android widgets to your Expo application with ease. We're going to be using the amazing React Native Android widget library that allows us to integrate fully native Android widgets in your Expo application. We'll cover everything from setup, configuration of the widget, resizing, sharing data between the widget and your application, customizing the widget by creating a fully dedicated screen where users can update settings for the widget. Our previous video in this channel was about how to integrate iOS widgets in your Expo app. So if you are curious about iOS, make sure to check that video out. All right, now without further ado, let's get started. We're going to be using React Native Android widget library. I'm going to leave the link in the description. It's, in my opinion, I think the best way to integrate Android widgets in a React Native application, and it works great with Expo. I'm going to leave the link in the description for your reference. Here's the GitHub repo in case you want to drop a star. And also I prepared an app example for you for your reference. In case you get stuck, you can check out the description and reference the code down here. So the first thing that I want to do is just go ahead and create a brand new application. So I'm going to go to my terminal inside my apps folder. Let's create an app by running create-expo-app. And the name of my application is going to be Android widget video. And hit enter. All right, there we go. Now we can see the intro, the newly created project. And I'm going to open this in VS Code. Next, I'm going to bring my real Android device. I have it here with the example app that I linked in the description for your reference. And then I'm going to select my Pixel 8 here in Android Studio. And then I'm going to have this running devices window floating so that we can actually see the device. It's nice to test this on a real device, but it also works on an emulator. And the cool thing about Android Studio is that I can control my real device here. Great. Now, the next thing that I want to do is simplify this project by running the reset project script that you can find in the package JSON. This script is just going to clean my project to be very simple. So I can say bond recent project, hit enter. And I'm not going to be using anything else from the template, so I can say no and hit enter. And now on the left, you're going to notice that the project is way simpler. Now let's start integrating the library. First thing that we need to do is install React Native Android widget. So let's copy that. I'm going to say bond install React Native Android widget. Just to confirm that everything is correct, you can go to the package JSON and confirm that you have this package here. Now, when using React Native Android widget, there are a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. First of all, the design and components that we're going to be using in the actual widget, it's going to be native code, meaning that we cannot write simple React Native stuff there. In that case, we need to use these components that we have here in the documentation. Let's just quickly take a look at the code example. This is a hello widget.tsx. And as you notice, we are importing flex widget and text widget from React Native Android widget. These components can be rendered in the widget. Let's go to our project, and in the root folder, I'm going to create a new folder and let's call it widget. And then let's create this hello widget.tsx and paste this code here. This is very similar to React Native. The only thing is that these components are going to be styled a bit different, like height and width are set to match parent. And then we can also justify the content to be at the center of the screen. And then we can just have a text. All right, so let's go back to the tutorial. That's the actual widget. But when designing your widget, you need to kind of like compile it every time that you change something in the widget, because at the end of the day, it's native code. So this great library exports a widget preview component that allows us to view the widget inside the application so that we don't have to, leave the application and recompile every time. So let's use this widget preview component in my index screen. I'm going to import widget preview, and then we can import our widgets like that. And hit save. So here we have a preview of how the widget should look like. Now, our project is still not ready to run. We need to do some extra configuration. So let's continue before we run the application. The next thing is registering a task handler. This task handler function It's going to basically receive events when the user adds and updates the widget in the home screen. And it's also going to handle press events in the widget. So let's create this file, widget task handler. I'm going to add it inside my widget folder. And let's just copy this example. I'm going to paste it in here. Now, this is, very easy to quickly reason about and read about. We are defining an object with the name of the widgets that our application is going to have. We can have multiple widgets. In this case, we only have one widget, hello. Okay, this is the name. We are importing the widget and assign it to this object. And then we defined the widget task handler function, which is going to take properties of type widget task handle props. And we can take a deeper look at this type. It's going to get the widget info, the widget action, either the widget was added, updated, resized, deleted, or click action data, and render widget function. So let's close that. Now inside this widget, we're declaring this widget info variable, which is abstracts the widget info from the properties. And then we defined the widget, which is taking the widget from this object using the widget name that we are passing in the properties. And then once we have the widget, we can render it when the event widget added is triggered. Now here we have all the events that we can handle, and we're going to use them in a moment. All right, next we need to register the widget task handler. Since we're using Expo, let's click on the Expo instructions. And this is going to require a bit extra modification because we're using Expo router, and we need to define an index.ts entry file in our application. But by default, if we go to our application, to the package.json, by default, the entry point of my application is Expo router entry. And we need to change that to be an index.ts that we can customize and add extra stuff related to the widget. So let's create an index.ts file in the root of our project. Of course, we need to update the package.json to be index.ts. Let's do that right now. Hit save, close that. And now we need to use the app entry of Expo router, which is a bit different from what we have in the documentation. So let me show you how you would do that. Let's open Node modules folder, and then let's search for Expo router. Here it is. Let's scroll down and we should see the entry.js. And this file is only importing Expo router entry classic, which is the file above. And this is what we want to have in our custom index.ts. So let's copy this and let's close this file. Let's paste it in here. And this is what we can modify at this point. If we go back to the documentation, we need to register the widget task handler like this. So let's copy this. And right after we are defining the app, we can import registered task handler. And then let's import our widget task handler and hit save. Okay, we're almost there, but we still need to tell the application that there is a widget called hello. So we need to register the widget. Let's go to the register widget in Expo section. And to do that, we need to use a config plugin. We need an image for the widget preview. And this is what the user is going to see when they open the widgets in our application. So let's take a look at the example app. If I long press and then press widgets, you can see these two Expo images. This is what we need right now for the preview of our widget. We can actually use the icon.png file that comes with the default template. So let's close that. You can also add custom fonts used in the widget, and then we can just set the properties of the widget. So I'm going to copy this plugin. Let's go to my app.json and let's scroll down. Here we have the plugins section. And after the splash screen, I'm going to paste react-native-android-widget, and then we can pass the properties inside this object. We can change this app.json to be a TS file or JavaScript file, like the example that we have here. But I think it's easier if we just copy the configuration object. And then let's paste it in here. Of course, I'm going to need to delete the extra curly braces. and hit save so that it gets formatted. Since I'm not using fonts, I'm just going to delete the fonts part. And at this point, we have only one widget. But if you notice, this is an array and you can define multiple widgets. So the important things here is that the widget name needs to be the actual name that we are registering and the widget task handler. This key value in this object needs to match this name of the widget. You can also add a label, min, width, and height, target cell, width and height, description, preview widget. This is important. This is going to be my image. So I want to use my icon.png since I don't have any other image inside assets. Now there's also an update period milliseconds, which defines how often in milliseconds the app widget wants to be updated. Default is 0, no automatic updates, which, at this point is what I want. And I think this is going to keep our file a bit cleaner. So let's remove that. And at this point, we're ready to create a development build and run it on my Android device. So let's open the terminal and I'm going to run npx expo rebuild platform Android. Hit enter. Okay, and we have a little issue because we cannot find this hello preview PNG. Yeah, I have to say images/icon. Okay, let me try that one more time. npx expo prebuild platform Android, hit enter. All right, it worked this time. And now on the left, we should have an Android folder. Here you can see it. This is the native project of my application. And at this point, I'm ready to run it on my physical phone, or you can use an emulator. So I'm going to say npx expo run Android and hit enter. Okay, the application is installing. Perfect. All right, and it seems that I made a small mistake. Okay, guys, so I had a little issue when trying to render the widget preview inside the index screen. The issue is that by default, React compiler is enabled in this Explorer project. And that means that, we'll get an error because the compiler cannot run on widget files because they are invoked outside React. And that was making our preview fail. But you can add this workaround in the babel.config.js, or if you are not using React compiler, you shouldn't see this error. I'm going to add this to the repo. But once we add this to the babel config and restart the application, we are able to see the preview of the widgets. And which is really nice is that we can come here and change the widget. Let's go to the widget folder. Instead of rendering hello, we can say, let's change the text to be expo, hit save. Let's refresh the app. Boom, there we go. Live update. Now, let's actually see if we can use it if I close the application. And here I have my Android app. Let's long press. And now I can see the widgets option. If I select it, I get the image preview. I can select it and then press add. And this is going to bring it to the home screen, hopefully. Okay, there we go. So after a moment, it got updated and we can see it there. Great. So this is the first step. We have the Hello World widget working, and now we're ready to do more advanced stuff. To showcase how you can share data, pass properties, change the aspect of the widget, let's create a new widget. And I'm going to call it counter widget. This is the perfect example because it has state, it has configuration that we can do, and a different UI. We can make it resizable. So let's create this counter widget. All right, so I'm going to start by importing flex widget, text widget, and image widgets, okay? Because I want to render the Expo icon. You can also render images, which is good to know. And then just importing the color prop type from Android widget. Now down here, we can define the widget, export function, counter widget. Now this is a very dynamic widget. So I'm going to be passing some properties to it. Let's define an interface for that. Counter widget props. And I'm going to be passing the current count of the counter and a background color. Of course, you can extend this as you need. And I'm assigning this to the color props type, which at the end of the day, it's going to be a hex color or RGBA color. Perfect. Now we can type the properties here and then destructure them. and use them in here. So let's have a return. Now, when changing the background color, we need to be careful about, the text color, because if it's a dark background, then the text needs to be white or a light color. So to validate that, I'm just going to hard code this validation and see if the background color is equal to one of these. Then I know that the color is a dark background. Based on that, I can define my text color. So if it's a dark background, I want to use white, otherwise, like a black color. Then I also have this subtle color that I'm going to be using for the powered by Expo text. And then in here, we can define the background color and button colors. This was actually generated by ChatGPT, but basically we are generating a lighter color for the buttons depending on the background. And finally, we can just return the component. It's going to be very similar to what we have in here, but in this case, we're going to have dynamic values. So I'm going to paste this example here. Oh, I have an extra return and I have an extra parenthesis. Okay, let's hit save. And this is how it looks. So I have a flex view for the widget. It's going to match the parent. The background color is going to be taken from the properties. And another important thing to notice here is that we have a click action that I'm giving it a name, which is open app. This is like the main container of my widget. So if I press on the widget, I want to deep link to my application, and we cannot have, JavaScript code here and handle the press event. Instead, we need to define a name for the action and then handle this event in the widget task handler. Okay, so keep that in mind. We have one click action here. And then we have, another view, which is going to be the header with the Expo branding. I'm taking this PNG, but I'm actually going to change this to be images/icon.png. I'm adding an image width and height, radius, and then a text that says powered by Expo. Then we have the actual counter. It's a view container. And then we have the first button. This is a flex widget, but we are adding the click action, decrement in this case. And another important thing here is that we're passing this click action data. So the data is going to come from the value count and the background color. So when we trigger this decrement action, we're going to trigger it with the count, the current count, and the background color. So we can pass data to these functions. It's like passing parameters. And we just have this minus text. And then we have basically the same for the increment button. And then we also have a text for the actual count, which is just rendering the value directly. Okay, so here we have the increment. We're passing the current count and background color as well. And then just at the end, I have a footer with a text that says counter. That's all. So let's hit save. This is my counter widget. Once we have our counter, we need to register it again, right? So let's go to the app.json. We have this array of widgets. Let's do a comma, and I'm going to paste my counter configuration. Remember, the name needs to match the one that we have in here. So in this case, I need to say counter, and then we can bring the counter widgets. This is going to be taken from here, okay? So this counter name, it's coming from there. I'm passing a label, width, height. Now, some important things here is that, I need to change this to be images/icon.png. I'm passing the update period milliseconds in this case. And I have the widget features, reconfigurable. This is important. This means that this widget can be configured because we can change the background color of the widget. Okay, so we're gonna need to do an extra change for this, but for now I'm going to comment it. And the resize mode means that we can, resize the widget. You can constrain this to be just horizontally or vertically, right? In this case, I want both, so let's hit save. Now let's go back to the widget task handler because we're going to need to handle more things here. So a couple of things to notice here is that we now need to, of course, render the counter when, the user wants to use it. We need to update as well the counter. We need to handle the resize of the widget because we said that we can resize it. And also we need to handle the widget click. So first of all, I have a warning here because this is telling me that property count is missing. Now that I said that we were going to have some properties, now it's asking me to add it to this widget. Another important thing here is that we need to store the current count so that we don't lose the value in the counter widget as well as in the inner application, right? Because we want to share that state. So we can use async storage to do that. And the good news is that we can use Expo SQLite. And by the way, I don't have it installed, so let's go ahead and install it. I'm going to stop the server, clear the terminal, and say npx expo install Expo SQLite. I'm using Expo SQLite because it's very easy to set up. Just like that, we are ready to go. By the way, that is going to add it automatically to the app.json plugin, so we don't need to do anything else. Let's close this, and let's close this as well. I'm going to be using a storage key value that comes with Expo SQLite. So let's import storage from Expo SQLite /kb storage. This storage is basically the same thing as async storage, but the difference is that storage from Expo SQLite supports async and synchronous operations. And right now I'm going to be using synchronous operations. So let's define some keys to store our data. I'm going to have a storage key for my counter, and then I'm going to have a background key to store the current background. That way we can read it inside the app and in the widget. Here I'm going to define a function, getStoredBackground. And let's type this from the color prop. So basically we're just gonna call this getItemSync. Like I said, we can do synchronous or asynchronous. When we do a synchronous operation, that means that we don't have to do a wait or async. This is why this function is not having an async operation. And this is actually very fast. So we get the item synchronously by passing the counter background key. And if we don't find anything, we are just going to fall back to this color. So we're going to be using this function in a moment. Now here's where it gets fun, especially if you have multiple widgets. When we get this widget added event, we need to first of all check. And by the way, when I'm using switch cases in JavaScript, I like to add curly braces because I think it's cleaner. So let's wrap this into curly braces. It's easier to see the code that is inside this case. So what we want to do here is check the widget name. So let's grab the widget info dot widget name and see if this is equal to counter. Because in the case of the counter, we want to render a different widget. Otherwise, just render the one that we had before. So in here, we can actually duplicate this and say counter widget like that. But this is actually going to expect the count and as well the background color. So let's get these values from the storage. I'm going to create a helper function because we're going to be using this a lot. Let's call this function get storage data. This is just a helper function that is going to return the count, which is going to be of type number. And then it's going to return the background color of type string. We already have this get stored background color. We could have done something similar for the count, but I'm just going to have this extra function so that we get, first of all, the count number. Otherwise, it's going to be 0. This is a string, by the way. So we need to cast it to be number. And then we get the background color just by calling this function directly. And then we can return both the count and the background color. And now TypeScript is happy. And we can use this get storage data down here. Let's say const equal to get storage data. We can destructure the count and background color and just pass it directly here. And background color. Okay, yeah. So I said that this was going to be a string, but actually this should be a color prop, right? instead of string. Now TypeScript should be happy here. Cool. All right, now the issue here is that we're going to get another warning because this widget is going to expect these properties as well. A dirty fix here could be just say as any, and we should be good. Now we can actually copy the same functionality when we update the widget. And this is because when we hit this event, we need to basically repaint the widgets, right? So we check if we are using the counter, we repaint the counter, otherwise we repaint the hello world. We need to do the same for resize. So let's paste the same thing here. When the user deletes the widget, we don't need to do anything unless, you want to trigger like a custom analytics event or something. You can do it here. But the one that we're interested in is the widget click. So let's handle the easy one when the user opens the application. So let me wrap this like this. And first of all, we're going to get the click action from the props so we can check it if it's open app. And I would recommend that you copy this manually so that you don't have typos. This is coming from my counter widgets here. If you remember, we added this click action open app. Might be also a good idea to abstract this into a utilities file where you have this defined as enums or strings in one place so that you don't have to copy them. But just to do things quickly here, I'm just going to handle this in here. And this is where you can use, your React code. I'm going to just use linking and open my application. By the way, I need to double check that that is my actual package name, and you can grab that from the app.json. This is my package. So my scheme, this is actually what I want. Let's copy the scheme and let's deep link into my app home screen. You can of course do more crazy things here, but this should take me to the entry point of the application. And that's the first action. Now we need to handle the counter. But remember, this widget click event or case, it's going to be hit for multiple widgets, right? Not only the counter. So we need to validate the logic that we want to run only for the widget that we want to handle in this case, right? So I'm going to have an if statement. If the widget name is equal to counter, then I do want to handle these events. So first of all, I want to know the current count and the current background color, and we can just take this from the properties. If you remember, the props click action data is going to come with a value. Let me show you the counter here. We're passing the value, which is count, and then we're also passing the background color. So the current value, we cast it to be a number. And if we don't get anything, we're just going to fall back to be 0. Now, for the background color, same thing. We access the click action data. Otherwise, we fall back to the default color, background color. If the click action was increment, we need to increase the count, the current value. So I'm going to say count equal to current value plus, if the action was increment, plus 1. If it was an increment, it means that we need to decrease, right? So I'm going to say -1. And now I have the current count. The next thing that I need to do here is save the current count. But before I save it, we can actually render the widget directly, passing the new number and then the new background color in case it has changed. And after that, we can save the current value. So I'm going to say storage dot set item synchronously. Let's use a counter storage key and we can pass the count. But remember that count is a number. So let's change this to be a string. And now the count is a string and we are storing it after increasing or decreasing the value. And after that, we break. No need to do anything else. Okay, let's see if this works. Let's open the terminal and run npx expo rebuild platform Android. And I'm going to pass the clean flag just to make sure that we don't have any cache in here. And then npx expo run Android. This will install it from 0. We haven't changed anything from the application, but if I close it, long press, widgets, now I see my counter widget. Let's select it and add it. And after a moment, we see the widget. Perfect. Difference here is that this one is resizable. And each time that I resize it, we are basically repainting it. Cool, very nice, and looks really cool. It's using the little icon here, which is the same as the application. Okay, now let's get rid of the hello world one because this one looks really cool. And let's actually press the button and it works, okay? Even if I remove it now, remember the count was 2. Let's go to the widgets, select counter again. And still 2 because it's taking it from the local storage. So that's very cool. And also it's really good to know that we can access the same saved value inside the application and render it. But what I want to show you now, it's a way to make this widget configurable. Because right now, if I long press, I don't get any other like configuration options here. It's just hard coded. And if I drag it, it's just remove. There's nothing else. So let's go to the app.json. If you remember, I deleted the configurable part here. So let's add it just for the counter. And let's rerun the application. I'm going to pre-build and then run on Android again. Let's wait a moment. Let's close the app. Now, if I long press my widget, now, as you can see here at the bottom right of the widget, we have this customize icon, right? But if I also drag it around, I have now the widget settings and I can drag it and drop it in there. But we're not handling this yet. So if I do that, this is actually going to break because we don't have a screen to configure the widget. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, fortunately, we can create a screen using, the good old React Native stuff here. So I'm just going to drag this screen since I don't want this tutorial to be super long. I'm going to call it widget configuration screen.tsx. And guys, this is just a simple screen that is reading from the storage using Expo SQLite KV storage. And it's also getting the keys to get the values for the background color and the current count. And this was generated by ChatGPT, so nothing crazy here. We get the initial color, and then we also allow the user to select a different color. Something important here is that we have this handle save function, which is just setting the local storage to the new value of the background color, which is mainly the thing that I want to allow the user to customize about the widget. And then we re-render the widget with the new configuration. So we pass the new values like this. We're bringing this render widget from the properties here because this is taking the widget configuration screen props from React Native Android widget. This is going to come with these functions, render widget, which allows us to just re-render, and then we need to set the result to be okay to signal the success of the re-render. Handle cancel, set result equal to cancel. This is also coming from the configuration screen props that this screen is going to get. And in here, we're just rendering the color that we want to allow the user to use. We set the color and we just kind of like draw a preview of how the widget is going to look like manually. And we have some handlers here to handle cancel and handle save. So this is just going to refresh the widget and save the new values, okay? So this is the screen, but we're actually not quite ready yet to use it because now we need to go back to the index.ts and register this new screen here. So let's bring our widget configuration screen, and then we can call registered widget configuration screen, which is another great function coming from React Native Android widget. And then we pass the widget configuration screen here. Okay, so let's hit save. Let's stop the server and let's start again the server. So I'm going to say npx expo start. And you can pass the clear flag to make sure that we don't have any cache. Okay, since I'm using a development build, by the way, let's make sure that we're using the dev client instead of Expo Go. So we can press S to switch to a development build. So if I press S here in the terminal, now we are in the development build. And if I go to my application and open it, it's going to refresh from 0. Oh yes, and it's complaining because I need to update my widget preview PNG. This file does not exist here. In this case is images/icon.png. Okay, let me reload the application. Okay, it's working. Let's close it and let's long press my widget and press the settings, and boom. Oops, I have a little warning there. But now I can see the configure widget, and let's change the color, right? And when I press save, we're going to refresh the widget. So let's press save. Boom, now it's pink. I can, press that icon or drag it, make it blue, save, okay? And I can also press increase and decrease the count. And when I press on the widget anywhere, we're going to trigger the deep link. Here we go. Awesome. So let's make it white now. Save. We can also cancel. So if I go to the settings, let's say I selected pink, but then I cancel, it remains white. And that's it for this video, guys. We learned how to configure the widget, set the plugin, make it resizable, change the background color and configuration screen, and also how to save and get data from the widget, how to handle click actions and press events on the widget. So I hope you liked this video. I hope you learned something new. I'm going to leave the source code in the description for your reference. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.